After 20 years as a sustainability consultant, working with large companies in global firms and well-intended teams, I realized that actually the only project we have is to ensure that business is serving life. And sustainability and ESG frameworks are not set up to do that. So I stopped. I stood back and I took a hard look at what would be possible if we used the tools, the knowledge, and the energy we have to truly ensure that all industries at all scales in all regions around the world are working in service of life. It's daunting. We have a long way to go. This is massive transformation across pretty much every industry. And yet it's exciting. We have evidence and examples all around us. What we need to do is decide to do it. With that, I bring you materiality. Let's have a look. When I launched this methodology a couple years ago, I was prototyping and tinkering. A lot of questions have come up since then. So I'm going to tackle some of the big ones and see what you think. So what challenge does the reality-based version of materiality solve for? Let's just take a step back. What does the old school one take a look at? It's really about creating a list of issues. Reality-based materiality asks a much broader and more fundamental industry-level question, which is this company working in service of life, or is it undermining life? You might be wondering, wait, aren't the SDGs supposed to solve for that? After all, the UN released those 17 goals and 169 targets a few years back with the intention of addressing interconnected global challenges, many of which are connected to business. My simple answer to that is no, they do not address it. In fact, they perpetuate the problem. This is uncomfortable to say as somebody who was very excited about the SDGs when they first came out. I too put those colored numbered boxes into many reports, created all kinds of tables to look at which initiatives were covering which goals. And now I realize that actually the SDGs are overly human-centric. They have economic growth as success, which we know is a recipe for trouble. They come from the very mindset that is creating and perpetuating the problems. This is a deeper conversation. I link in the downloadable deck to an article that I wrote that goes into more detail. So how is this different? Old school materiality, we would, as consultants, literally deliver a deck that went into details on issues, climate change, human rights, etc., showing which are the most important issues for the company to take a look at and which ones are stakeholders most concerned about. The real results of old school materiality is improved transparency with key stakeholders, including investors, improved relationships with some of those stakeholders, risk reduction, and maybe some revised strategic goals. I'm not suggesting those are bad things in and of themselves. I am suggesting they do not work in service of life. They work in service of the bottom line of the company. We don't want to confuse that with solving sustainability issues or truly serving life. Whereas materiality based in reality looks at what the company says its purpose is, how it actually generates revenue. Often right there's a disconnect. And then what would be needed in order for this company to serve life? And in some cases it's doing good things, but in many cases the business model itself is literally dependent on the problems it says it seeks to solve. The results of a reality-based materiality assessment are insights and input for a company to adapt to be in service of life. I'm just going to pause us here for a moment. This is not a tweak. This is a fundamental rethink about how companies do or don't serve life. And what I've learned is if we need to convince decision makers to sign on to the idea of even interrogating the question, how does our business model generate revenue in relation to the challenges we seek to solve, we shouldn't go any further here. This is getting at the business model. This is asking the fundamental question, how does the company create value? Does it serve life or does it undermine it? Of course, it's complex and there's a lot of details to go into there. But if this is a bridge too far, which it still is for a lot of people in mainstream business, I encourage you to get back to doing something else right about now. If you're still with me and you want to see how it would work, let's do it. In old school materiality, we would identify a list of issues. It would start with a great big long list and we'd narrow it down to a shorter list, prioritized based on what we heard from stakeholders. By the way, we'd only talk to human beings, what we thought based on our review of all kinds of fancy materials, and then really boil it down to one very expensive PowerPoint deck, presentation to the executive to say, ta-da, here are your issues, hand over the matrix that plotted one issue in relation to the other. New school materiality really seeks to say, hey, we'd like to understand how this business model works. How does capital flow? Let's talk to some people who have perspective, all external, open to having a real conversation about what it would look like for the company to work in service of life, including folks who can represent perspective of more than human lives and really center that perspective. What would this river basin, this migratory bird species, this forest ask, expect, or even offer to this company? What could that look like? The point here is not to figure out which issues are more important than the others. It's to identify how and if this company is serving life, or is it undermining life? These are not absolutes, and there's diverse perspective, of course. And from there, to summarize key observations and say, well, what would be possible? The results of that are visible, open source ideas that can serve to transform the company, should it be willing. One more key thing that's different about the process with old school materiality and new school. Old school, all of this information, even the really useful, intelligent stuff around the issues, is in a black box. We don't know who said what, which stakeholders were interviewed, what differences they had in their perspectives. It is confidential. All the public gets to see is a list or a matrix of the issues, maybe a little paragraph about how they did it. Nothing useful. We know deforestation is an issue. We know human rights are breached left and right by many industries around the world. New school materiality says this is open source. Industry is open source, whether we like it or not. We eat it. We sleep on it. We live in it. It is all around us all the time. This is a conversation that belongs in the commons. As much as possible, materiality based in reality draws on publicly available information, makes the conversations public. There is no black box. So the inputs are really quite different, and this is a critical distinction. I mentioned that to come up with that issues list in old school materiality, we would talk to stakeholders, we would review documents, we would also look at public sources such as the media, what the other sustainability frameworks are pointing to, saying for this type of sector, these are the issues. That was pretty typical. We're slicing and dicing issues that have been out there forever. You'll notice in the visual here, it's quite jumbly. This is a word cloud that is legit real material issues from 4 different ESG reports. If you've ever looked at any materiality matrices, you will notice it's a jumble of issues. They're all interconnected. They're at different levels. Materiality based in reality says, no, we do not need to parse the issues ad nauseum. We know what they are. They might be more significant in one region than another. One stakeholder may be much more concerned about some issues than others. That's relevant. We don't override that, but we say, you know what? We have a pretty good grasp of what it means to live well, to be healthy, to be able to look after ourselves and others in our communities, to have thriving ecosystems. We can continue to draw on global frameworks and ever-evolving learning and wisdom. We do not need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on expensive decks. And remember, in old school materiality, stakeholders are asked to rank the issues. Hours and hours of interviewing, thousands of stakeholder surveys, aggregated to come out with one list of issues ranked on top of one another. Reality-based materiality says, no, when we have a chance to speak with people with different perspective, we want to hear from them, what does an economy that works in service of life look and feel like to you? What would be true if that were happening now? And how is this company working in service of that? Diverse stakeholder perspective about to what degree a company is working in service of healthy ecosystems and healthy societies. The outputs of reality-based materiality then are quite different. There is a public analysis, strategic ideas for transformation around how this company could transform its business model to truly contribute to life and making us more well, making our ecosystems healthier. The stakeholder views are public as part of the materiality matrix, the way I've set it up, and others, by the way, are free to adapt this. Each stakeholder who presents a perspective, you can hear their conversation, you can watch the live tape. If they chose to stay anonymous, their views are still public by way of a transcript. We can interrogate a little further because our views are different. We live in a very pluriversal world. The summary that provides these insights is public. Critique and potential forward-looking adaptations for the company, typically transformational, that others can run with. The idea is to inform and inspire real change. Remember, I said this wasn't a tweak. I'm glad you're still with me. You might wonder, well, how would this even work? I have been testing and trialing this. You have access to 4 case studies through this deck. The first 2, Google and TD Bank, are prototypes. I was really testing out the methodology. I got my legs under me a bit more with Danone and JBS. You may see things that you would do differently. You may have questions. You may answer the questions differently. On that note, over to you. I hope this is valuable. I hope you see provocations and practical applications that you can take into your own work to make real change to business decisions so that industry serves life. All of this is available as a free download. If you don't already have it, click through here. The links will be in the description, and it's free for you to take and run with, adapt, revise. Let me know what you think. How would you approach this differently? I know there's tons of possibilities out there. There's more than enough work to be done. If I can be of any help, please reach out. I'd be honored to talk with you, perhaps offer your organization some inspiration and advisory input. We've got a lot of work to do. I'm excited to do it with you. Thank you so much for watching and for walking alongside. I'll see you on the trail. Bye for now.